I discovered a new meditation technique. If you have a hard time watching the breath, sit outside in freezing cold weather and watch the tip of your nose freeze. Hello, I'm Ajahn Jyoti-Paulo. Welcome to a winter wonderland and sauntering into silence. It's not even 3 in the afternoon, and that's how high the sun is in the sky right now. We had some pretty extreme weather this week. It got down to minus 34 degrees. I noticed I have a lot more material still of Ajahn Sona's tea time he did with the community on spiritual camping, so I thought I would include a bit more of that today. Also, when Mitch and I were watching the video about Mount Langley, doing some investigation for the summer, there's this one scene when I was watching, I was almost in tears, just for me, like how beautiful that landscape was. And I kind of joked with Mitch, and I mentioned it to Ajahn Sona as well. It's like, would you ever get bored kind of in this, kind of setting? I mean, I don't get bored in this, so I very seriously doubt I would. And Ajahn Sona, he said this many times, but he said, yeah, he went out on a camping trip and he never returned.
That's kind of part of my motivation, was to get down to the basics and see, how is real living very, very simply. Does it have to be a terrible thing? How much do you need? How much is it just want or ignorance? So that was I'd come back from having been out at 30 and 40 below zero for 10 days, living on about 10 ounces of food. It just handfuls of this and that, sleeping on the snow, come back to this house and so forth. And I think, you really don't need much. It's just amazing. I was happy, happy for 10 days. And this hits you, that the huge amount of structure and values and all kinds of ideas are just really not how it works. But I had to do this again and again and again and again to get to that point where it was just a fine experience. I missed nothing. It took me months and years to get to that. But of course, what happened is that then I didn't care to go back. I didn't care about anything, so I left. It was like, say, I went on a camping trip and never came back. So, yeah, it's a learning experience, and most people they're reading a lot of magazines about camping equipment and boots and this and that. That much of it, a lot of this was done in the 70s and 80s, early 80s, until I went on a camping trip and never came back. I ended up living in a little shack off in the middle of nowhere.
There's the Shack Monastery. That's it. That's the shack. The door left open. There's still a bit of a blue tarp on top, which we put on there to keep the rain out. That's been there for 26 years, that tarp. Amazing.
Which is like a camping experience. By the way, I rented a little shack for $50 a month. It was leaky, had no insulation in it, in the bottom of a valley, just heavy duty weather, just north of Whistler, about 50, 60 kilometers north of Whistler. And, compared to living outside in the snow in the winter, any broken down keeps the snow off. It's like, there's nothing to worry about. And it even had a bit of a stove in it. You could actually light a fire in the thing, so you learn to be if you're comfortable in all of these conditions, a lot of just you get a lot of freedoms are opened up to you. But it's learning about interaction with the weather. This is a long learning experience. Even if I describe it all, it's really something they do to the smallest degree. You learn little things about that. Just how to keep your hands warm, how to keep your feet warm, when to stop fiddling with something because you want to get it done and your hands get to a certain point, and you learn to stop then and not go 1 or 2 minutes longer. And you stop and you take your gloves off and you put your hands where? On your stomach, because your hands can't heat themselves. Only exterior heat applied to them can heat them. And the same with your feet. How far should you go, etc. And it's something we noticed, and we had to teach ourselves. We would talk. I have a friend that used to go camping with me. We would say, I keep trying to get some sticks for the fire, and I keep going past the point where I should have stopped and warmed my hands up. And now it's an excruciating experience. Why don't I stop earlier? What the hell is the rush? And whether you like it or not, you just stop. And it was so hard to remember this that we decided after a while to write these things down, not when we got back, but while out there. So we had this book, and the book was the Bible. It was what the Bible is supposed to be. You cannot override what's in the book. When you're back in your nice warm living room, you can't trust your own judgment about what to bring at 40 below zero. Only what you write down at 40 below zero is the truth. And what you believe in your deluded warm living room about, I don't think we need that, or I think we should take that along. And then you check with your book, take that along, don't take that along. And it seems like, why? Because you're in a warm living room and it seems so easy to do something. But when you're in 40 below, nothing's easy to do. Your fingers are freezing and this and that. So you have to take notes. And that's an experience for life in general. It's like, you got to take it in the circumstance, because you don't have good judgment outside of that situation. So, that's the note-taking while you're on these trips and the learning experience. But then, of course, when you go home, you have to try to get experience from others. And I had to go back before the modern times to find out how people's approaches to camping before 1930, So I started to read a history of these things and get the earliest camping books. I got back to this guy, I think it was in the 1880s, and his name, he gave himself a name, kind of a native name, Nessmuk. And he was George R. Oliver or something like this. But he learned from the natives and so forth, and he made his own canoe and he made his own clothing and so forth, and he had the whole thing bundled together, including the canoe, was like 18 pounds. And so I had to get outside of our time, because we're contaminated with ideas about boots and ankles and framed packs and all of this stuff. And then we went further back even, of course. We're surrounded by a native population, huge native population, that been living for 10,000 years out in 40 below zero. What do they wear? How did they do it?
Thank you, Ajahn Sona, for your words of wisdom. People have been asking where they can get information about the project that Mitch and I are going to do down in the Sierras. And Birkin is going to put a little bit up about that on their newsletter. If you want to get that information, you can go to Birkin's website, and I think it's the newsletter. Subscribe to their online newsletter, and probably in a couple of weeks that little article we have is going to go out. So thanks for watching.